That radio chick Cheryl Lee here with you. Welcome to the Still Rocking It podcast, where we'll have news, reviews and interviews with some of our favourite Australian musicians and artists. Today I share a chat I had in the Zoom room recently with the legend that is Angry Anderson. Rock singer-songwriter, television presenter, reporter, actor on both stage and film, and lead vocalist with hard rock band Rose Tattoo since 1976. We'll hear about his early life, his musical influences, the current Australian and upcoming European tours, and of course some songs you know and love, but also some that might be new to you. What's Rose Tattoo's Angry Anderson been up to lately? Let's find out. You're with Cheryl Lee, that radio chick. Thank you so much for joining me today. I have got an Aussie legend in the Zoom room with me. Please welcome Gary Stephen Anderson, aka Angry. How are you today, Angry?
Actually, I'd put it the other way around, chick. Let's get back to the chick thing. I mean, that's a very PC inappropriate. I love it myself. It's like, hey, you know when you call someone love or babe or honey. I can't. I'm just trying to figure out where I was the other day, and a youngster, sort of late teens, early 20s. I mean, and I said, "Oh, thanks, honey," and she just looked at me like, "How dare you call me honey?" And I just thought, no, fuck it, I'm old enough to be your grandfather. If I want to, call you honey, it'll be honey. So I love the fact that you identify yourself as the chick.
Oh, thank you. Well, I love that you love it, because I have actually had that comment about, oh, chick. I'm like, yeah. Oh,
Really? Yeah. See, there you go. What worries me, I mean, it's one of the 74 things that worry me about the young today, and at my age I can say that, with some sort of reflective authority, if you like, or qualified authority. But just recently I went to a very small country town and spent a couple of days there doing a series of talks and talked to a couple of schools, and also it was a young offenders program and council workers, people who did the roads, etc. And it was all about mental health and those sort of issues. And I started out with the high school kids, not so much the primary school kids, and I said, I understand as a parent. I'm a parent of grown children now, so like from 30 onwards children. And I said, that's something I did offer to them. I said, your parents will always think until you actually get married and have children, and possibly even then, you will always be thought of as your mum and dad's children. And I said, take some advice from an older bloke. I said, that should never be something that you feel uncomfortable with. You will understand as you get older the significance of always thinking of your children as your children. That doesn't necessarily mean that you don't think of them as maturing or matured, that you don't think that they don't have a valuable opinion. I said, when we refer to our children as our children, you are our offspring. You are the children of our union. But I said, I realise as a biological parent, but then one of the wonderful things that happens when we become a biological parent is that we become a parent in the expanded sense, like in going back to tribal living. They understood that all parents were parents to all children. And it's part of the great wisdom of the divine, the process, the recreational process that we all feel, which is why older people are so concerned about younger people. I just heard on the radio this morning, there's still this debate going on about whether they should ban phones from classrooms, but they're going to allow iPads. Now, I understand that iPads can and are, in most cases, a tool or an aid to educating, but phones, no. And I don't understand why phones were ever allowed in a classroom. When you're in a classroom, you're in a social group that's there for a purpose.
To learn.
A phone is a recreational device. It's an iPad. Okay, we're going to wrestle with that one. But I did say to them, I said, I understand as a parent that you're growing up in a a pretty scary world. And it does concern us as your biological parents. And hopefully they have the kind of biological parents. Every kid has the kind of biological parents that do worry about their state of mind, how they're perceived physically and intellectually, spiritually, which is the unspoken. Even to this day, parents and teachers have a real problem talking to kids about spirituality. For what I can tell, particularly talking to young girls, because they've got a real different slant than young blokes on sex education. I still think to this day, and I think that's a reflection that's one of the negative reflections on our education system. Their sexual education seems to be woefully inadequate. You know, I was brought up by a single mother, fiercely Roman Catholic, so she had a very religious stroke spiritual, in her case, religiously. She realised how spiritual her belief was later in life. But it took her a long time because she was an indoctrinated Roman Catholic, not so much an educated Roman Catholic. And so the more that we talked about spirituality, the more that she came to take my view, that she realised her own spirituality as well. And it's one of the things that's really, really lacking. And I do say when I get the opportunity to talk to the secondary school kids, not that I would not talk to primary, but I think it's a concept that you need a certain amount of living experience and all
maturity.
Level of understanding, to grasp what is the spirituality, what is the spiritual experience, you know. Primary school kids have them all the time. Their whole world is one of wonderment.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is the total, you know, that's the real spiritual experience. They don't realise it. They haven't learned yet to intellectualise the process.
Still Rockin' It podcast with that radio chick Cheryl Lee. We'll play a couple of songs, some that you may know and some from some lesser known albums that might be new to you. We're going to start with Rock and Roll Outlaw, that I remember seeing Rose Tattoo perform on Countdown way back in 1978. Back to chat more with Angry after this. So much to cover. His movie with Mel Gibson, his appearances on the Midday Show and Current Affair. We'll hear what Angry likes to listen to, where his interest in music came from, and the current tour. The last time I saw you was in March at our Benithan Park at Under the Southern Stars.
Oh, wow, yeah, well, this March.
Yes.
Well, of course. The previous two Marches, we haven't been doing much, have we? I mean,
no. So how good was it to be back out in front of an audience?
Well, it was twofold. I made an acquaintance, as did Bob, in the early days with the boys from Cheap Trick. So I hadn't seen those fellas since I lived in Los Angeles. I think it was 1989 when I was over there doing a solo album, Blood from Stone, which the song Bound for Glory came off. I ran into them a couple of times and, ran into them once at a studio, and we arranged to, do lunch, which is back in those days, and that was the thing in Los Angeles, was to do lunch. And so we did, we hung out a bit together, which was lovely because they're extremely pleasant company. They're really, really good people. But I didn't know too much about the other bands. I mean, I was familiar with Stone Temple Pilots music, but certainly not Bush and certainly not the strangely named Black something motorcycle. I kind of thought, it might be a bit like Zakk Wylde or, any of those sort of like wild, Ted Nugent type people. And they're this sort of like introverted, sort of very gothic-y, sort of like, why would you call yourself a black something? What was it, Black Rebel?
Yeah, I
motorcycle
think so.
Gang or something?
Yeah.
And I thought maybe they were taking the piss.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, we'd done a few gigs leading up to, in the 12 months previous. I think we'd done about 3 or 4 gigs, very obscure gigs. I remember we went to Darwin to do at the ski club. There was a 4-band bill. Yeah, so we'd only done a spattering, so it was great to get out and act, the whole vibe about the setup and, the tastes, the flavours, so to speak, the smells, the senses. It was all that kind of stuff. We've been doing a bunch of gigs now, and at the beginning of July, we're in Europe, right through to the middle of August, and end of the first week in August, actually. So
you're back.
Yeah, so it'll be, living on the liner again and getting used to putting up with someone else's snoring and smell of their dirty socks.
Still Rocking It podcast with that radio chick Cheryl Lee. We'll be back with more Angry after this to find out who introduced him to Stone's Ginger Wine. So a very appropriate song, I think. One more drink with the boys, and this is from a German release Rose Tattoo album, Pain.
Pain was an album that we did in Germany. It's only ever going to be released by a German record company for Europe. Predominantly for Germany, but for Europe, for when we toured there for the next couple of years. And it's got some fucking mighty tracks on it. Really, really, really good tracks.
Watching the fight on TV, drinking beer and wine. If I go now, I'm gonna make a scene.
You guys, you certainly look like you were having a great time up there. I have to ask you, the bottle, did it have tea in it or something stronger?
The bottle?
On stage?
Oh, my Stones? Yeah. No, it's Stone's Green Ginger Wine.
Oh, was it? You know what? I just assumed you were having a little bit of whiskey or something.
No, actually, it's funny you should say that. Ronald Bond, he put me onto Stones. He actually reintroduced me. I remember when I was a kid, I was in my teens, late teens, early 20s. There wasn't really, unemployment the way that we understand it today. So you would go to within the CES office and they would allocate you work. There were very, very few people in those days that were on benefits. It certainly hadn't become the industry that it's become now. But I took the easy option, and I've always liked to work physically. So I went down and loaded trains. I grew up in Melbourne, so it was at Spencer Street, which is where the rail yards were. And we loaded trains or unloaded trains in the yards, and that's what we did for a job. I remember my introduction to Stones was that during winter, the guys that were like the leading hands, which worked under the foremans, they would have a little office and they'd give you a small glass of here, this will get your blood going, son.
Get this into you.
Yeah, that's the one, because it's a vibrant drink, But so once I left the rail yards, I didn't drink it anymore. And I remember years later, I think it was one of the times where Angus and Bond came to jam with the band, and Bond had some in a flask. And I said, "What do you drink?" He said, "Oh, Stone's Green Ginger. I drink it for my throat." And I said, "Yeah." I used to drink it when I was a kid, So he reintroduced me to Stones. That's what it actually is in the bottle, yeah. They actually do make one called Stone's Jack, which has usually got a Union Jack flag on the label. That is a blend of Stone's Green Ginger Wine and whiskey.
Yes, right.
But, you only drink that at your peril. It's just kind of something that is going to kick your ass, Like, I just drink straight the Stones Green Ginger. Yeah.
Maybe that's the fountain of youth. You are 74 years young. When I saw you in March, there was just no stopping you. You're up there rocking your socks off. What is your secret? Have you discovered the fountain of youth?
No, I love that Face Fast has got a positive aspect to it and a negative aspect, like everything in life.
Yeah.
And one of the things that there's a picture of a guy, usually a biker type with a beard, he's got a shirt on, right, and said, like one of the slogans is, if you haven't grown up by the time you turn 60, you don't have to.
Yeah, I like it.
And yeah, exactly. I love the other one, which I bought my daughter. One was like, my father's a crusty old bastard. He's a biker. He's got a bad attitude. He swears a lot. And if you ever mess with me, they'll never find your body. I love that one. So.
I like that one too. Still Rocking It podcast with that radio chick, Cheryl Lee. One more oldie but a goodie now before I play another song from a lesser-known album, One of the Boys, from Rose Tattoo's debut self-titled album on the Albert Productions label, produced by the famous Vander and Young team in 1978. You mentioned your mum and upbringing. Did you know from a very, very early age that music was going to be your future? Was it in your genes? When did you discover that music was going to be your life?
Very early, fortunately. My mother arrived here. My mother's Mauritian, and my father met her in Mauritius. My biological father was a jockey, and he was riding in Africa. Long story short, he ended up in Mauritius, met my mother and brought her here. He was full-time riding in those days, so he sort of basically dumped my mum, pregnant with me, with his parents, my grandparents. And we lived for the first 6 years of our life. Now, the youngest, with my grandparents, while he was away riding, but the youngest of the Anderson boys, my Uncle Ivan, was a drummer in a swing band, a very accomplished musician, actually. He had a wonderful voice, as did Colin, my biological father. He was a great singer, wonderful singer.
So it sort of is in your genes a bit.
Pretty much. I think, talking about the DNA or the gene pool. So from a very early age, from, year zero or day zero, I was exposed to Ivan's record collection and the fact that he had a radiogram, a record player. And he had a record collection, and he gave me at a very, very young age. Mum said it was around about 3 or 4. He upgraded, I suppose you would say, his radio. I'd become obsessed by the radio at that stage because I spent a lot of my early years not really having a social life. I remember I had a bit of a social life with the girl that lived next door. That was like over the fence. But anyway, that's another story. But for the first few years of my life, I didn't have a social circle outside of the home with kids my own age. So my whole focus was on sounds, music, yeah.
I did a little bit of research, and goodness me, angry.
Oh, uh-oh.
Well, there's just so much that we don't know about you. You've done everything, man.
I'm not too sure about maybe the things you don't know about me, you're not meant to know about me. But go on.
Apart from obviously being the vocalist for Rose Tattoo since
75.
75. I've got 76, but 75. So that
well, officially we were playing New Year's Eve, and we had been playing for the second part of 75.
Yes.
We were rehearsing and we would do gigs, and we were playing a lot as bands around Sydney getting a start. There was 2 main gigs. One was at Donny Sutherland's gig down at Coogee, but the main one was Checkers in the middle of the city.
Yes.
A very notorious nightclub. And you would do 3 or 4, sometimes 5 sets over like 6 hours. We were so popular with all the colourful gangsters, the colourful characters. Well, they were gangsters.
Yeah.
Let's split hairs. They were very colourful clientele, and they wanted us to play New Year's Eve. So the New Year's Eve of 75 into 76
is the official date.
Yes, we say that we were born on the stroke of midnight. When we became.
I just wanted to congratulate you on that. Longevity of a band is just amazing. There's only a handful of bands, who have managed to do that. So well done. But also, you were made a member of the Order of Australia in 93. Congratulations. For your role, as we've discussed, with your youth work and charity work. And I really thank you, because I had a little read about the amazing work that you have done. It's great to see artists giving back so much like that. So thank you. Ian McFarlane, music rock historian, said, over the course of a lengthy career, the gravel-throated vocalist has gone from attention-grabbing rock and roll bad boy to all-round Australian media star. And as I say, as I read your bio, I thought that's so true. You've done so many things. You played with the Party Boys, but you appeared as a human interest reporter on the midday show with Ray Martin and A Current Affair.
Absolutely. My mother said to me after the first year that I was with Ray, which was we started with him in 85. I was home visiting mum and dad, my stepfather, who's my real father. Colin was my biological father, but my father, in the real essence, the true understanding of a father, Bert was. And I was there for Christmas, as, you know, that was traditional. Mum said, finally got a real job.
Oh, bless her.
God bless her socks. Yeah, she's sadly we've lost her to dementia now. But anyway, I got the job, and it's a roundabout bit of a story, but it's in the book, and I am now, you know, compiling stories and notes for a larger volume, if you like, a larger version of the book that already exists. But yeah, I was working with, when I say working, I was asked by a guy while he was in jail that I used to visit. When he got out, he was going to start a halfway house for young offenders, which he did in Woolloomooloo and at the back of the cross. And I used to go down there and just, you know, like hang out with young male offenders that once they got out of jail, he would, you know, gave them somewhere to come and stay, and he would try to find them work. He was turned around. He was a very colourful character. He was converted to Christianity in jail by the then Reverend Ted Moss, who ran the Wayside Chapel. So, you know, and it was down there while I was working for him, just as someone who you know, my background, I identify. I mean, Rose Tattoo, when you look at the lyric content, etc., and our approach, our whole look, it's those people. It's our people. It's where we belong, and that's true to this day. And I think it's a great wisdom where people never fall into the trap of believing their own publicity. So, you know,
Yes.
So we never got to that point, gratefully. So yeah, that's how I got my start. I was there, and there was a crew from 60 Minutes came down to do yet another sensationalisation on Street Kids, and they heard that I was there. Basically, they were wanting to know what was, you know, as you say, the attention-grabbing bad boy of rock and roll. What the hell was I doing at the cross? And they actually, when I say used me, I mean it served both purposes. But they said to the bloke that I was working for, can you take us to meet the kids that would normally avoid the press in the back streets, so to speak? The hidden places, you know.
Yeah, the real people.
The real victims of the crime and the drug distribution, the prostitution, whatever. So Mike Walsh, who had the midday show in 84, which is when I filmed that story for television, he saw the footage and he asked me come on to speak on behalf of those kids, and I did. And the year later, Ray took over. He watched the footage and he said, would you come on as a regular?
Still Rockin' It podcast with that radio chick Cheryl Lee. A live bonus track now from the album Blood Brothers, Nothing to Lose. Back more with Angry after this, and we'll find out what he likes to listen to.
Blood Brothers we knew that Mick was dying, and I wanted to do something to honour his contribution, because Mick and I, apart from Scarred, we wrote most of the songs on the first album, most of the songs on Assault and Battery, the second album, and we wrote most of the songs on Blood Brothers. And it was kind of like we knew that, you know, he was going to die very soon. And, I just wanted to, it's kind of like, it could have been very much our last statement. It didn't turn out that way, but at that time when we recorded it, you know, we'd lost Pete. Ian, of course, Pete and Ian went, you know, within 6 months or whatever. Of course, Digger all those years before, and there was the only out of that lineup, there was only Mick and I thought, you know, really, we'll do another album and then we'll do a tour. And I thought at the time I was going to walk away, but it didn't happen.
And legacy and everything that they started lives on. Their music lives on, and, you know, you carry them with you every time you play.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, yeah. They're
I got no more proof. I got no more proof.
There's a couple of things that I'd like to touch on. We could talk all day, I think, because I thought this was quite ironic. You had your biggest hit in 87 with Suddenly from the single drum. And of course, it was used as the wedding theme for Neighbours, where Scott and Charlene got married. And this is the ironic bit. So Kylie Minogue put out her cover version of Locomotion, and that went to number 1 and kept Suddenly out of the top spot.
Well, actually, it wasn't Locomotion. I remember, I was in a dressing room with Cliff Richards, and he said, I'm hoping I go number 1 because it'll be my 25th number 1 record or whatever. I was over in England doing Top of the Pops, and I'd met Cliff when he came out to do Midday Show on several occasions. And he said, I hope it's not that god-awful song by Kylie and Jason. And it really was, even though they did a few singles together that were, passably good pop songs. This song was, I think it was written by Scott Waterman Aikman, and when it was like rubbish. But, it was that song that kept Suddenly out of number 1. Gratefully, Cliff Richard soon popped them out of number 1 and went number 1 and remained there for weeks. He said to me, and I thought it was a lovely compliment, he said, if I don't get number 1, it'll be Suddenly because it's such a beautiful song. And he said, I couldn't be happier.
Supported Guns N' Roses. Excellent. But here's something that a lot of people might not know, and I know I didn't. This just goes to show you've done everything. Jesus Christ Superstar, you played Herod.
I did. I'd done a musical before that called Rasputin.
Yes.
And John English played Rasputin. I played Vladimir Lenin because it was a bit of poetic license. They had to have the component of, because it was around about the time of the Russian Revolution. Rasputin was, in a distant sense, was involved in, but only because of the royal family. But yeah, it was a wonderfully written play, and John was amazing in the role. I played Lennon. Yeah, it was a very interesting experience. But later on we did The Superstar with John Farnham and John Stevens, who played Judas, and the amazing Kate Ceberano who played Mary.
Yeah.
And the amazing Russell Morris. So you play guitar?
I don't. Are you referring to the guitar in the background?
Yes.
Yes. Do you know Gary Burrows? He worked for APRA for a long time. He plays with the Boys, the Rustlers. You probably know him if you saw him. He's been around almost as long as you have. That's actually a CD player. That guitar is a CD player. And it belongs to Gary Burrows, who I do one of my shows with. He and I co-host a show, and that's his. But I thought it made a nice prop.
Yeah, no, I love it because it's got that whole 70s.
Yeah, 60s vibe. Yeah.
Love, peace and mung beans. I think it's a beautiful touch. You know, funny because that saying was around back in the day, peace, love and mung beans. Must have been 15 or 20 years before I actually asked someone, what the hell's a mung bean?
What is a mung bean?
It's one of those vegan-y type. It's like lentils. I discovered
it's too
lentils.
Good for you.
I remember as we did in those days, bands often shared houses with, particularly with women, but because, they'd look after you and they'd cook for you and they'd do your washing, whatever. More than likely be involved with one of them. And I just remember this one woman, and she was a wonderful cook. She was a vegetarian in those days. Like, she made this most amazing lasagna out of nuts. She used to grind, with a stone and pestle. Yeah, she would go to the market and buy bags and bags of nuts and lots of, 3 or 4 different nuts. And she would grind them up, and so that was a substitute for meat.
That was a bit unusual back then.
Oh, it was thoroughly unusual.
Yeah, not common like now.
No, I remember she brought home this disgusting thing one time, and I saw her eating it, and I said, it smelled. And I said, what's that? She said, it's yogurt. I said, what is that? And she said, it's a fermented product from cows, in those days. Try it, and I went, it doesn't smell that good. And I tried it, and so we're talking about the early 70s.
Yeah. Now yogurt's everywhere and everybody eats it.
Yeah, exactly. When I think about it, mung beans. She used to boil all kinds. She used to buy these huge bags of those big Italian beans, which were quite exotic. But see, living in Melbourne, and we lived quite near, at that time, we lived in Carlton, which is not too far away from the big market.
Yes. Carlton.
And Carlton.
Carlton.
So she would buy bulk like we'd all put in, and she'd buy bulk things and make big pots of stuff for everybody. Like there's about 8 people in the house.
Well, maybe that's your secret to the fountain of youth. All that healthy eating as a youngster.
Yeah, possibly. To counterbalance all the chemical interference. Yeah.
That's right. See, it's all about balance, yin, yang, you know.
That's it.
Still Rocking It podcast with that radio chick, Cheryl Lee. Back to find out some of Angry's early influences after this, but I thought I would play you a song from John Farnham and the amazing Kate Ceberano from the 1992 Jesus Christ Superstar, where Angry played Herod. Everything's all right. I don't know how to love him.
Try not to get worried, try not to turn on to problems that upset you.
One thing I wanted to ask you is, what do you like to listen to, Angry? Just for your own listening pleasure. What's your thing?
It's horses for courses. Driving, I like rock and roll. You know, because you have your favourites, right? So my favourite rock band of all time, favourite rock and roll band of all time, apart from the very early influences, but the band that I love the most is the Faces. You know, on the road, I'll listen to the Faces. I'll listen to the very early Rolling Stones. I'll listen to a lot of Leslie West and Mountain. I listen to things that, you know, I mean, I can sing the songs that, you know, I relate to the music. I mean, obviously, that's what you do with music. Anything that's sort of just, you know, it's got energy, etc. Rose Tats and I had a manager years ago called Stephen White, and he is most famous for manages country acts. Lee Kernaghan. For the last 10 or 12 years, I think, he's had this wonderful act called the Wolf Brothers, and I play their albums. Yeah, I play their albums a lot in the car. You know, it's because it's going music, you know what I mean? But at home, in a car too, I was just thinking about it. I play, you know, Santana always, and it's freely from the 70s and taken lots of acid and really, you know, like just spacing out on. Whereas like with Floyd, I won't play that in the car. I'll play that at home.
Yes.
Same era, if you know what I mean. But like some people might be very surprised, actually. I listen to all my favourite singers from my early influences are the classic ladies, Mahalia and Bessie Smith and Billie Holiday and Peggy Lee and Nina Simone, Odetta, the great blues soul singers.
I was going to ask you because I thought that there was some blues in the background there, because I read that originally you wanted to be a blues guitarist, you know, like Dylan and then Lennon, but you found yourself in a band with 3 guitarists, so you ended up singing, and the rest is history. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Prescribing to some of the fundamentals that I believe in and I believe in. Really, there's no coincidence in life. There's no real just haphazard collision of circumstances. I mean, there's a collision of circumstances, but it's not random. It's not haphazard. There is a purpose. It's not preordained. It's not predestined, but there is a fundamental reason that most things happen. And yes, found myself, actually, it was 4 guitar players.
Oh, but, you had no hope.
No, but one of them played bass eventually.
Oh yeah. Well, lucky you could sing.
Well, you know, that's arguable. People will debate that even to this day. Yeah, we all tried out singing, and none of the others had any taste for being a vocalist, right? And I was so bad as a guitar player. I still am. But it's one of the things that I like. You know, we're drawing very close to the end of Rose Tattoo, but I've got my own band ready to go, which is more based on R&B sort of band, like the Faces.
Right.
And, so very, very much in that vein. A band from Melbourne called Palace of the King, and they're a band within their own right, of course, very talented, wonderful writers, beautiful musicians. Their influences are very much the 70s, which is the era that I want to use as my basis for the band. Yeah, so I just, one by one, we got up and sang. I chose to sing Twist and Shout.
Twist and Shout, that's right.
Shake it up, baby. Yeah, and they just all looked at one another. I think they had it planned to this day. and the other thing too is that I was such a lousy, and I still am such a lousy, clumsy guitar player.
They thought, what are we going to do with this guy? Let's put him out the front.
Well, pretty much. I now look back on it, and when I did look back on it, I thought, I was never going to get the job as a guitar player. Yeah, they were so much better than I.
It's worked out perfectly. Now, we were talking about...
for me it has.
Yeah, that's
for
right.
me it has.
Still Rocking It podcast with that radio chick, Cheryl Lee. We're going to speak more to Angry about how he got to play the character Iron Bar Bassie in this film, Beyond Thunderdome, back in 1985. Here's Tina Turner, We Don't Need Another Hero.
Out of the ruins, out from the wreckage.
We've got to get onto the tour soon before we go, but talking about you having been there and done everything, you were also in a film. You played Iron Bar Bassie in Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome.
Extraordinary experience making a film. The other films that I've been in have been very low budget. One movie I did was like $250,000 budget, and it was shot over about 3 months. You know, that's not a whole lot of money for that many people and, production. But small parts. And I'd done one movie before Thunderdome called Bullamakanka, which is a crazy movie. George is an avid supporter, but he's avidly or passionately interested in Australian film. George Miller, co-writer, director, Kennedy Miller. And we, as a management, approached George Miller on after I saw the first Mad Max. It wasn't long after that I asked management, I said, look, I reckon they're going to make another movie. And then not so long after that, I read that George intended to make a trilogy, being, 3. I mean, because he's very, very, he's steeped in esoterics. There's a lot of symbolism in his movies, etc. I mean, obviously, good, bad, the whole thing, the anti-hero, So I was convinced that he was going to make another movie, and I said to my management at the time, approach them and let them know, that I'm available, because when you looked at the first movie, I thought, geez, I'll fit in there like a hand in a glove.
That's right. They won't even need to dress you up.
No. So anyway, we were touring at the time that they cast and started to shoot the second movie. But this is how spooky life is. One of my dearest friends at school, whose band I was in when I became singer, was a guy called Vernon Wells, and he played Wes in the second movie. He was the lunatic with the pink mohawk. And I went through school with him. He was 2 years ahead of me. And in fact, when we were, I suppose, for want of a better word, practically everyone where I grew up was involved in some sort of street gang or whatever. And he was the leader of our gang. And we were later on, went on to do music together. Yeah, so all those years later, Vern got the part and I missed out because I was touring. So I was completely bummed by that, like just, inconsolable. Oh, yeah. And then he said, oh, mate, you got no idea. And I said, fuck, I don't want to hear about it. I want to be in the movie. But anyway.
You had FOMO.
Well, so anyway, sometime later, I'd done Bullamakanka. They were having a meeting about the third movie. George Miller said, look, there's this character. He's a rock singer, Angry Anderson. He would be amazing in the movie, but apparently he's uncontrollable. He's a loose, he's very loose cannon. The makeup lady said, look, I did a movie with him a year ago called Bullamakanka, and she said, if you can keep him away from the alcohol, he's fine. So I got the part, they had a part, this lunatic. It was only 3 days shooting, and it was only in that opening sequence where Max arrives in Bartertown, and Frank, who was, he was the governor, so to speak. He worked for and under Tina. auntie, her name was in the movie. Yeah, so George, we shot those scenes. I met one of my best mates on that film. He's 6'8". He was the giant, Master Blaster. Had the dwarf sitting on his back. He was the guy that fought in Thunderdome, Fort Max.
Yes.
Anyway, him and I became best mates, so we still are to this day. And he's a plumber. I work for him. I do his labouring for him when I'm not working at a band. But that's how wonderful the connections that we make in life are. But after that movie, George said to me, he said, like, we talked about the connection between Vernon and I. He loved Vernon. He thought Vernon was great. He advised Vernon to go to Los Angeles and take up acting and, like, go to acting school. Vernon actually ended up doing about half a dozen movies. Like, he did 3 or 4 with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Always played the bad guy. I think he did at least one with Claude Van Damme. But they were those sort of, buffy boy, good boy, bad boy. So, and George sort of said, you should go and try your hand. And I said, look, I don't want to be playing iron bar for the rest of my life. You know what I mean? And Mel, I know enough about Mel to defend him when people say, what a turd, what a hard boy. I said, no, mate, you don't know him. He's a great bloke. One of the things that he and I had in common, we had demons from our past.
Yes.
Anyway, he said to me, he said, like, if you want to, he said, I can introduce you to a couple of acting schools, because he's so honest about it. He said, let's face it, what you've done so far, that's not actually acting. He said, I think you can learn to act, or, you can learn the skill. That was a very complimentary thing to say, because we spent a lot of time together during the movie, Mel and I, because he was living down at Coogee and I was living at Coogee at the time. We kept our acquaintance socially after we finished the movie as well. I enjoy his acting. I always have. I think he always plays Mel to a point, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
But he's a wonderful director. He's co-written and directed some amazing films.
Yes, very, very talented.
The Passion. I mean, Apocalypto, which is like an absolute favourite movie of mine. But, there's a list of movies that Mel has done that are quite, really, really extraordinary good movies, yeah.
We must get onto your tour.
Yeah.
You're going to be a busy boy in May. You're coming to our town on the 6th at the Gov.
Mm-hmm.
I'll see you down the front.
Let me have a look at. I've got May 6th, the Gov. The second town, city, because we had a very, very strong following from Elizabeth and around that sort of whole area. Buster Brown used to play in the early days with Lobby or Billy. And
so Lobby Lord, is it, and Billy Thorpe?
Yeah. When they both had their bands. Adelaide had a very strong, sharp skinhead population, which we used to play. And I think it was called the pub called the Paraka, I think.
Yep, that's the Bridgeway at Paraka.
Yeah.
It was the Paraka Hotel.
Yeah, we used to play there a lot. We had more success. We had our first chart success, firstly in Newcastle, then in Adelaide. And they seemed to be the only two cities that whenever we released any single, they were the two cities, the two pockets, if you like, that just, really in a real sense, we've probably got, I've always attributed those two pockets as the most contributory factors to our early and enduring success, if you want to call it that. Yeah.
Still Rocking It podcast with that radio chick Cheryl Lee. Back to have a final bit of a chat with Angry. After this song, I don't think we can have a chat about Rose Tattoo without playing We Can't Be Beaten.
We can't be beaten. We can't be beaten. Hear our voice. We can't be beaten.
Well, good luck for the rest of the tour. You've got a few in Victoria and then New South Wales and then Tassie. And then, as you said, good luck for the overseas tour.
Yeah, keep our fingers crossed. It's a strange thing because I'm not putting myself in the grave yet just because of my age. But one of the things you do realise, going back to the if you haven't grown up by the time you're 60 thing.
Growing up's overrated, Gary.
Well, but the thing about it is, and of course, I don't want to go into it either, but the passing of life it becomes more noticeable the older you get, because in reference to to the original Rosie Tats, they've all gone. My father's gone, my brother's gone, who was 10 years. But so what it does is it gives you a very sobering, realistic look at life.
Yeah.
You realise it's not infinite. As George Harrison said, all things must pass. And that's very, very true. And I think that's one of the things that's very obvious, that Rose Tattoo is in its very last days. Well, anyway, I was going to say that about the last 2 years. Lost. Of course, lost can't ever be relived. It can't be got back, in other words. So all of us, the whole planet, in a sense, but particularly in Rose Tats, we've lost 2 of our last years, if we like. So
yeah. So make every moment count, and
absolutely
enjoy every second.
Maniacally, obsessively. We're going to wring every ounce out of it we possibly can. Yeah.
You have been so generous with your time in the Zoom room.
I've enjoyed your company.
Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you at one of our favourite places in Adelaide, the Gov. I'll see you down the front. I'll give you a wave.
Righto. I've cut back drastically on, recreational drinking, but I do have the odd beer or 2 after a gig, so it'd be nice to have a beer with you.
Alrighty. Thank you so much again. Still Rocking It podcast with that radio chick, Cheryl Lee. How about we hear that track we spoke about earlier? It was the soundtrack to Charlene and Scott's marriage on Neighbours all those years ago. A beautiful ballad, Suddenly. Again, all the best with all the touring, and I look forward to seeing you very soon.
See you at the Gov.
See you down the front.
Yeah, righto, mate.
Ta-da.
See you, mate.
You're with Cheryl Lee, that radio chick. Thank you so much for joining me on the Still Rocking It podcast. Hope to catch you again next time. Get out when you can, support Aussie music, and I'll see you down the front.